I'll call the meeting to order. Everybody unmuted, we're good? Hi, everyone.
Hello.
How's it going?
Great.
Great. Looking forward to tonight. All right, so everybody, did everyone take a look at the meeting minutes second? Do we have any comments?
Is it the 29th? Yes, 29th.
Yeah, 29th. It's written 22nd on this, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's the last one. I'm sorry, 29th. I apologize. Thank you. I have a couple comments. If I could find them. Anything else? Oh, you are. All right, yeah. I guess I'll start with mine. In section 3, it just said Mr. Warner stated that they started this discussion previously. I think that was me who said that. So that first paragraph refers to Bill Warner. I think that's probably me who said all that. Whoever, those are my only comments. As far as clarifications, anybody else?
That was in the first.
That was in section 3,
Sentence 1.
sentence 1, first paragraph, correct, thank you. Meredith, you just started. I knew you were coming, Tim, no problem. We've not done that twice, we've only had 4 meetings, so. All right, so if there's no other comments, I'd like to, then I have a motion to, vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from March 29th.
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes, March 29th.
Thank you.
Second that motion?
Second, take roll call, we'll go around the room, Heather?
Yes.
Mike Weber, yes.
Bill Warner, yes.
Lisa James, yes. Michelle Kirkby, yes.
Tony Papantonis, yes. Bob Donahoe, yes. Bob Meany, yes.
Meredith Chamberlain, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Robert Worth, yes.
Kristen Simonini abstain.
And welcome, so that was my next point, so, replacing Jess is Kristen, congrats on the election and welcome to the group.
Thank you.
And, all right. So. That was section 1, and now let's do the warrant committee presentation. Steve Callahan is here. Thanks, Steve, for joining us. Appreciate that. I think we're all looking forward to hearing what you got to say.
Okay. Thank you. You want to put it up or I might mess it up here, so you might. Can you do it on your computer or you want to come through it? Well, while he's doing that, thank you for inviting me to meet tonight. Appreciate that. We did a presentation back in October for the warrant committee, where we went through some financial modeling and around cost mostly. And the suggestion made then was, well, gee, this might be useful for the school building committee. They might be interested in this. So that's sort of the background of what I've done is sort of updated that presentation. And put pretty much in a little PowerPoint presentation here, but hopefully you had a chance to look at it beforehand. Let's give it these things. All right. So when I first joined the warrant committee, one of my first assignments was to join the subcommittee for this new school building project. And I spent my first 3 months diving into details around the building project. And right before town meeting. So I learned a lot in that process. And mostly around space needs and costs and things like that. I am not a designer architect. I have a financial background. So, but this is really, it's called the start of a conversation because I have more questions for you folks than I have answers. So, these are really, just thoughts and things like that for you folks to consider. So it, it intentionally raises more questions than it provides answers. And so, it's by no means precise. This is big picture, order of magnitude type discussion. So don't expect any precision in anything we cover here. And my hope really is that it's really to educate and inform, both both you as well as residents who may be listening in, and aid in maybe level setting some on some important facts and issues around cost. The other thing I want to just mention before we go through it is that with any financial modeling, it's all based on assumptions, right? So I think they're, informed assumptions, but it's really up to you folks to kind of decide, are they reasonable? And so that's the other thing I wanted to mention. The next slide. So, first, we're sort of in a much different environment than we were 18 months ago. As everybody knows, inflation is very high. It, today we've seen it shoot up to close to 9%. Recently, the core inflation number is 5.6, and the Fed is targeting a 2% inflation rate. So they're on a mission to bring inflation down, and one of the tools they have is interest rates, and so they're changing to a restrictive monetary policy, and they've undertaken significant rate increases, everyone knows, over the last year. So 18 months ago, when we voted on the school project, rates were at like a 50-year low. Where a month before that town meeting, we issued a bond at 1.46%, a 20-year bond. So that just gives you a perspective of how things have changed in this short period of time. And so, all this basically means it's no surprise that from an options or cost or taxes standpoint, costs are going up, and what we do with a project is kind of gotten smaller, the option. And so, really, the questions, is really, what are the planning guardrails as you go through, you start this process? And should you eliminate some options, based on feasibility? As you can see, all of these are really significant economic risks that have changed. And so, I'll go through them in the presentation, but there still remains quite a large range of options, at least in my opinion, that I think on a preferred path forward, alternatives of any future school building project. I think that I've heard a lot of different views on what people think. One is we need to have a planning process that has a hard limit or a cap on what the tax increase is going to be. I've also heard people say they don't care about costs. It's all about the process. And that, if we do the right process, people will pay whatever it is. And so other people are concerned about, smaller enrollment. They thought the enrollment was high. And then I think some people, think that there's a cheaper option, right? So, that we somehow need to explore that and come up with a cheaper option. So, I'll go to the next slide. This is really just, just the group, the topics that I'm going to go through. Really, I think between you and the community, we all need to agree on priorities around what's the right enrollment, what's the educational program, what are the space needs. Next slide. So again, these are just things I thought that need to be studied further, but yeah, I don't have the answers to these questions. Hopefully this group will figure it out. But basically, what should the design enrollment be? What's the grade configuration? What's the educational program and the related space needs? What's an acceptable tax impact for residents? And then lastly, what's the source of project funding? Because as we all know, we've made an application to the MSBA. We don't know if we're going to get accepted. And so, if we don't, there's very limited, or even if we do, there's limited other sources of funding beyond just taxpayers. There's, so I did some brainstorming and I did talk with Christine. There are potentially, we know we have the state hospital, so there should be some land proceeds from that potentially might, be put in a discussion for a future building, school building. There's the Trinity payment of $1 million to the school department. And there's I've heard Eversource has increased their incentives, so there's perhaps additional incentives from when they last looked at this 18 months ago, if you get to a net zero building. That's not big dollars though, but it's something. And then just one other idea that Christine was sort of thinking about recently, and she mentioned to me, the town of Hingham has recently implemented what they call a tax mitigation stabilization fund to basically sort of fund in a stabilization fund money to mitigate tax increases over a future period of time. So that's an interesting idea that maybe could be explored. But anyway, those are just some of the the things that I was thinking about. Next slide. This is really kind of just educational, just to make sure everybody understands what really impacts our taxes when it comes to a new school. And there's sort of three broad categories. There's the interest rate at the time you borrow. There's the project cost, the amount of the borrowing, and then the loan terms. The two boxes in yellow are ones that we can't control. They're sort of under interest rates, there's economic conditions, the borrowing environment. We just talked about how that's changed drastically in the last 18 months. They're not in a, the borrowing environment's gone from very favorable, some would say once in a lifetime, to a situation where it's not as favorable and it's gotten worse. The credit rating of the town is important. We are currently a AA1 rated town. If we were a AAA rated town, we'd be able to save, quite a bit of money on a borrowing, another 50 basis points off of the interest rate. So that's a tough goal to get to, go from AA to AAA, but it's worth looking at. And then space needs. So under project costs, there's obviously construction costs, which we have no control over. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are some pressure points in that area that you probably need to understand. And then space needs, again, on space needs, design enrollment affects that, and the educational program and scheduling that happens within the school. So how the school is used and the programs that go on there. And then lastly, the bid decision of the project itself. There's this decision around design bid build versus construction manager risk. I know you understand this from the last project, but that is can be a significant difference depending on what you choose. There can be up to, I've heard up to 10%, difference. Typically, from what I understand, Design bid build is used in new construction, and construction manager risk is more like an ad rent out type project. So on the loan terms, the term of the loan makes a difference. It's 20 years, 25, 30 years. And then the method of amortization, there's some pros and cons with each method there. I won't get into the details, but I have modeled later on the level debt method because it yields the least impact to taxpayers. Okay, and the con for that method is it costs more over 30 years. But this is a 50-year life building, so asking taxpayers to pay more early on, it gets a little tricky. So anyway, next slide. This is just some information that I got from the school department. This is their latest NASDAQ spring 2023 estimated enrollment. You'll see here when you get out into the red circle, but the enrollment, gets to a peak of in 2032, 509. And the current enrollment's 389. So there's some increases in enrollment when you get out to 2031, 32, and 33. And the next slide will give you the actual. Go to the next slide. There's a bit of a birth boom that happens in 2021. You can see the births went up to 138. It's a COVID baby birth boom.
Yeah.
And so the light blue here is based on children that have already been born. Okay, so they're just projecting out actual kids. And then the darker blue is an estimate of based on what they think, births will be over the next 10 years. And you can see that if you look in the 4 and 5 columns, well, actually, there's this in the top diagonal of the light blue, you can see those numbers. They go from 230, 233, 237, 241, 42. So they get up to like 241, 242, around 240. And then right below that, in the dark blue, under the 4 to 5 column, you'll see that class in 2031 gets up to 279. Then the next year that class goes into 5th grade at 283. So that's a pretty big class. Jeff, do you know, I didn't know the answer to this, but do you know if these incorporate the state hospital?
I don't think they do.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We give them that information, but I'm not sure if this is, I'd have to call them and see if they
Okay.
put that in there.
Well, anyway,
Even the state hospital was only 63 kids, K to 12, or
Yeah.
60 something, wasn't it?
it wasn't a big number, yeah. So anyway, that is what it is. I just gave it to you for information. The next slide is, you go to the next slide. This was just, from my understanding of what designers do, they start with enrollment. They look at your classroom student policy side, and they calculate a number of general classrooms that you need. And then you round that up because you can't have a partial classroom. And the MSBA, what I've done is I've just taken the MSBA minimum class size and the net floor area of 900 and done some multiplication to come up with these net floor area required just for general classroom. You'll see there's not a difference between the 450 and 475. They're both 18,000 square feet because of the way the rounding works. And when you go to 500, you jump up another 1,800 square feet. And then 575 is the 23,000 square foot scenario for just general classrooms. You go to the next slide. This is just what was done in 2021 with the WheeLock proposal. You can see under the SD, which is the schematic design column, it was 27,000. And on the right box, there's that 27 represents 23 of general classroom space, 1,300 of breakout rooms, and some STEM space of 2,400. It was 26 general classrooms. The health and PE, I've just highlighted that because there was some criticism with the proposal back in November 21 that the gym space was larger than the guidelines, and so that's my attempt to just highlight that difference there. The rest of these space needs are, you can see, are fairly close to what the guidelines are of what the MSBA had. Next slide.
Should I just ask a question at the end? Or can
No.
Should we go back a slide?
Yeah, sure.
And I know, Michelle, that's a separate, but this is relating to this right now for me, so. On the next presentation we're gonna do, or questions that we have on this. I'm just curious about whether you look at the 500 or the 575. General classroom student policy. So I'm looking, where is that policy coming from? Because it's not lining up to what I'm seeing in the other document.
The 24 or the.
The 24 isn't, it says. Well, the policy is the max, so if you use the 24, you're literally at the max policy recommended class size, and then there's the target, so. I know
Yeah.
they're two separate presentations, so I'm trying not to muddy the waters, but these
Yeah.
numbers in determining the classroom number of classrooms. You're maxing out at what the current,
Right.
so I just, it makes me a little nervous. Personally, because it gives you no wiggle room.
Yeah, well, that's something you guys all have to.
Okay, I wanna make sure that as an educator, I'm going through and I'm like, I personally would not target for 24 in a fifth grade classroom, so I just am,
I know we're
and then I'm
talking,
not,
yeah, because I have a similar question. What is, and I'll ask the school committee and the educators in the room. What is the optimal class size students? Because obviously there's 26 classrooms, but if with an enrollment of 575 and 26 classrooms, you have 23, children in a class. What's the optimal size?
so on page 10 of this one, it outlines, the policy recommended class size and then also the target.
So 3 to 5. That 23 is right there. Current target is 20 to 23, so we're at the max.
Right, so that's what I'm just saying, like, we're.
Yeah, these are,
saying the
remember,
max
these are
is-
order of magnitude, big picture.
Yeah.
I was just trying to illustrate. Model different assumptions
Mhm.
and give you just a general sense of.
Yeah.
How important is enrollment? Does it really make as big a difference as you think it does? If we go to 23, what's the impact to the number of classrooms? Does it, and then how many classrooms get added or deducted? And that's all I'm trying to do here. But at the end of the day, you folks decide all these assumptions I made, Bill. So we'll go to the next slide.
Just generally, just a quick comment, that the numbers you use are perfect because they're maximum, that's the maximum enrollment you saw.
Well, that's why I did it.
I understand why you did
I
this.
tried to be, conservative. But, so the next slide, you want to go to the next slide, then go to the next slide. So all I did here was, again, under the 3 enrollment scenarios, I combined 450 and 475 because they were the same general classroom space. I took the WheeLock proposal, square footage, net floor area, deducted the gym, 2,200 for excess gym space. And then deducted the reduction in classroom space. So for, when you go to a lower enrollment, that has more of a reduction, 5,400. Because it's less classrooms, less general classrooms. And the same for the 500, that's all this is doing. The one caveat I put here is that this is big picture, so. All those other areas, you folks need to decide what's the right what's the, you'll have to defend whatever space requirements you come up with. And you decide upon. I didn't, I saw that they were pretty close to the MSBA guidelines. I didn't, my gut tells me that they're not too sensitive to enrollment, like a dining space or a gym. When you're talking about these changes in enrollment, probably you don't get big changes in square footage and some of the common areas like that. So, but you guys have to look at that further. I just want to let you know, I didn't look at that at all. The next slide. I'm sorry, did you have a question? Who had a question?
Could you just go back one?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is like, can we go back one slide before this? for a
Yeah,
second?
yeah.
Okay, so your previous slide, can you go one more? This is just for general education classroom. So the note on this last slide that you showed us, the other, like, room to do individualized services for kids.
Right. So
They'll
if
have
you- yeah,
like a great increase in enrollment in the autism population, or just in the autism population in general compared to when Dale was built.
Yeah.
All of that would be extra space in addition, because
well,
it's not really.
yeah, like go to the next slide. So. Okay, so special ed has its own line item that's not in, I just looked at that first core academic. That's where the core general classrooms are.
Yeah.
There's a root, there's some space in there for STEM and some breakout rooms based on the way they designed it. But the next line item, there's a special ed, 7,000 square feet of special ed space, art and music, media, the dining room. It goes on, you can see the list
Yeah.
here, but within special ed, you will have to, I didn't do it. But you'll
Yeah,
have
no,
to
that's
decide
just
what's the
trying
right,
to-
what's the right,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
just want to understand.
what's the program and how much space do you need for that program? So, does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Okay,
I just find that sometimes those things, as educators, we know that sometimes these other pieces don't get the attention that the main classrooms do, and then it almost becomes like an afterthought where if you're not servicing the kids on IEPs and 504s and disabilities correctly, then their impact on the classroom and the attention they take away from the other teachers, making sure that they can get to all the kids, there's an impact, like you see it. So it's just me trying to make sure
mean-
like how this is all sort of.
That number, I think I'm
Okay.
thinking about it differently than you, that's a big number to me. That number is much larger than the proportion of my school that we have dedicated to special education. Because we have moved more towards like an integration model, so our special education students get to spend a significantly greater amount of time in the general education classrooms. Which means that, we're using that 27,000 numbers of square feet to really accommodate special education, and that's a shift in staffing too. So from a program standpoint,
Go top level.
we're in a co-top model,
Yeah.
so that's a big number to me, but a lot of districts aren't doing that, but that's kind of the way things are moving.
Did you go, knowing that you were gonna do the team teaching, did you make your classrooms a little bigger than the state said?
I don't know the answer to that. Our classrooms, we do have classes of 24. I mean, 24 is my current threshold. So if I have, 3 classes in a grade level and they each exceed 24, then we end up adding another section for that grade level. So 24 is it seems like a high number because that number's grown over time, but it's a reasonable cutoff. It's a reasonable number for, elementary grade classes.
For 4th and 5th, I'm assuming it's lower for K1 too.
Yes, but to be honest, like my current kindergarten classes have 25 kids in them because we had some move-ins and it's manageable for, for a short period of time. So 24, 25, it's not ideal. An ideal number is as low as possible, right? But a maximum number of 24 is not unreasonable, I don't think.
How many of your classrooms are co-taught? Because I'm just thinking about like you having that number and then you have 2 educators in there versus,
I have at least one co-taught classroom in every grade.
and we did not have that.
Yeah, so I just want to piggyback off what Robert was saying, because I totally agree with him in the case that we always try to have the least restrictive environment, and have all the kids integrated in wherever and whenever we can. However, just in my tenure of 8 years there, just with the makeup of the students that we have, whether it be through comfort rooms or, access students that need space, to handle the curriculum at their own rate or what have you. We still want to make sure we get all kids in the classroom as much as we possibly can. But right now,
basically with the special education services that some students need, along with the mental health challenges we're dealing with right now, that extra space is, so important. Kind of coming from a guy without a big footprint over there, but I just think that when looking at that design, I just wanted to jump in with that, because I think he's exactly right. You want to be least restrictive, but you also have to meet the kids where they are. And I think that to have that space for them, rather than, trying to carve something out or in a hallway or something like that, really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, the MSBA guidelines on that special education is, just under 900 square feet, it's just under 7 full classrooms. And then the core academic, the way it was designed last time was, obviously 1.5 classrooms more than.
Just an acronym.
Yeah.
Sorry. NFA is,
That's
Uh,
the
net-
net floor area.
Square footage.
Yeah, we'll get into that later, but, so, any more questions on this, or can we? move
No, it's good, thank you.
Okay, next slide. I think we covered this already. Next slide. So on construction costs, I apologize, this is not my graph. This came from the MSBA website, so I have to explain it a little bit, but these are, all these dots here are basically school projects for new construction in different municipalities in Massachusetts. They track this over time. The orange line is the average construction cost, and you can see they're delayed in extending that line. It's only through 20, I guess, July 20. But you see Medfield's is that little X up there. The only other thing I wanted to point out here is that the MSBA construction funding limit, it did get increased in October. So from the last project, it's now at 400. This project, currently in October, it got increased up to $432 per square feet. And that, they did that obviously because of what we've experienced over the last year. They had projects that were coming in and they bid them over what they estimated. And towns were having difficulty dealing with that after they got the town vote. So they actually, they increased this, and they actually covered, if you were in the MSBA program, like Medfield would have been covered from any increase that would have happened, because we were at the timing of when we got approved. But so that's why you can see the pretty big increase. They haven't increased it much over time, but it's really jumped up there.
Steve, they had canceled the accelerated repair program
And they
reallocated that money to the.
Yeah,
districts
they
that-
canceled the accelerated repair program. And for a year, and they took all that money and gave it to these projects that were already out there. So. Yeah, it was a creative way to, I guess, deal with a problem.
And Steve, those other boxes, so
Yeah.
on the right-hand side, I'm looking at orange boxes, blue
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah.
Those are votes pending, and I assume the orange is votes approved.
Yes, so if you go to the website, I could figure this out, but basically you hover over each box, it'll tell you exactly whether it's schematic. There's a code like different, I think the empty box is schematic design, and then maybe. Maybe, I'm not sure what the blue is, it might be PSR. It's the phase of their submissions.
Okay.
Of what the costs are. But the ones at the very top are Boston projects. That's why they're just off the chart expensive. Anyway, probably next slide. This is just to give you an idea of some recent elementary school projects that we were sort of tracking that are similar in size, I guess, to what we were trying to do. Ashland, you can see there, these are all coming in over their, what they got town approval for, all the bids are coming in higher. The Amherst one was the most recent one I had seen online, and that is at 769, and that has a 9% cost escalation built into it. So that's included in that number. And they did it like a year ago, well, not even a year ago, plus 9 months ago, and it was 737. So you can see that, that's really, I have heard, though I haven't been able to verify it, that Hopkinton's numbers are high 7, even I think it might even be closer to 800 per square foot, so. So I chose, again, you can change the assumption, but I chose a 700 to 800 range. Because I thought it was a reasonable range to model. The next slide. So these are the three enrollment scenarios. Within each scenario, I modeled the 700 and the 800. And you see the first line item, the net floor area is just, this comes from that previous slide, right? Adjusted for general classroom reductions. And it's the same for 700 and 800. The 4 classrooms came out for the 500 enrollment, 6 classrooms came out, for the 475, 450. And then on all of these scenarios, there's a 2,200 square foot reduction for the gym space, even the 575, like that took the gym space out. So the next line item is a grossing factor. So you construction folks probably can explain this better than me, but my understanding is most designers use a 1.5 net square foot to gross square foot grossing factor. And that's to allow for hallways and bathrooms and common areas, even thickness of walls and stuff like that. The MSBA, if you exceed that, they won't participate, and so most designers, they struggle to get below that, but it's sort of it's their way, it's the MSBA's way of kind of controlling projects so they don't get crazy big. And so the construction cost per gross square foot is, so that grossing factor gets you gross square feet. Then you layer in the assumptions on the cost per square foot. And then you get down to total construction costs, which includes site work, but not ineligible modular costs. So in the MSBA construction, database, those cost numbers, their construction cost does not include modular costs. The MSBA does not reimburse for modular costs. So
Sorry to interrupt, when you refer to modules, you're talking about literal modular classrooms to move children out.
Yeah. So if you decide on a scenario where you have to use modules,
Right.
that would just add to this cost, and you wouldn't get any reimbursement for it. So it would just add to the bottom line cost.
And it doesn't include soft costs either, correct?
For the project costs, or for construction costs, no. So there's a 25%. So you'll see when you go from construction costs to total project costs, there's a 25% added there for all those soft costs.
Mike, what's an example of a soft cost
Furniture.
for furniture? So none of that
Yeah.
MSB. What about playground at the school? Is that,
I think that's all on us as well.
that's all on, so, okay.
Some concept.
Furniture, books, materials, playgrounds is all on us?
Jeff has a better idea of it.
Yeah, FF&E, that's what we call software.
Oh, the what, Jeff?
FF&E, furniture, fixtures.
Yeah.
Equipment, audiovisual stuff,
So what I've done is, so that gets you to these project cost numbers.
that 25% may cover most of that
Yeah,
in this scenario.
yeah, in this scenario.
There's some reimbursement for FF&E too. I mean,
Yeah, it was a
all
small
the
percentage.
computers and all that, the MSBA will do reimbursement.
So on the assumed, so for the MSBA reimbursement, I have taken, they reimburse 432 gross square foot. Plus, there's a reimbursement on soft costs for the project manager, the designer, the engineering, furniture, fixture, equipment. Those are all eligible for reimbursement. So for the formula is and I've assumed a 40% reimbursement rate. The prior project had 43. because of some incentives that we qualified for. I tried to be conservative and just use 40. But so if the example is if you took the 450 enrollment scenario, the 84,000 gross square foot times 432, plus the 7 million of stock cost times 40%. That's how the formula works for the reimbursement. And then, so you can see the difference, you go from, there's just you'll notice that people might want to tie the 575 back to the November vote. They're going to be off because there's some, the square footage assumption's gone up by $25. It was $675 when we voted on it. I'm modeling 700 at the low end. And then the square footage, I've reduced 2,200 square feet out of it. So it's not going to tie exactly. The reimbursement rate was 43. I'm using 40, but it's kind of close to the numbers that we had, for the vote. So anyway, the next slide is talking about interest rates. So I think the borrowing is at least 2 years away, maybe 3. The important point I think to understand is that when you do when you issue debt, 30-year debt, you cannot refinance or refund it until it's after 10 years have passed. So you're sort of locked into this rate for 10 years. Whatever we borrow at, we're locked into it for 10 years. And there's a data point here on the North Tri-County Regional Vocational Technical High School that we're part of Norfolk. It's part of Norfolk County. We're going to be paying it. So they made a presentation. Frank got this information from them. They're planning borrowing. They haven't done it yet, but they're planning on a 30-year debt at 4.25%. And the credit rating, while we don't know the exact credit rating, it's going to be a composite of Norfolk County towns. We're assuming it's probably close to our credit rating, AA1. That you're not going to get AAA in all those towns. I know Westwood's AAA, but you're probably not going to get AAA rates. And then, so we talked to Hilltop Securities based on some historical information that research I did. We picked a range of 3.5% to 5% to model. Okay, and currently, the rates are actually a little bit below 3.5 or 30. Like if they did something today, but the volatility in rates is really crazy. It's you can, especially in the last 3 or 4 months, things have really swung wildly. So anyway, I've modeled all, I modeled 3.5, a 4, 4.5, and a 5. So, and you'll see that later on. Next slide. Again, these are all based on a level debt service amortization schedule. Next slide. Right, this didn't come out. Using PowerPoint? Well, basically what he has is there's a slide that sort of, I'm trying to explain it to you. This the craziness of the PowerPoint, but it's a slide that looks like this. Basically, it's got in the blue here, it's got our existing debt service projected out to fiscal 2027. And then it's got an assumed debt level of 10%. Because historically we were close to that. And it's also a financial metric that a lot of towns use. They don't like their debt service to go over 10% of revenues for a long period of time. It's okay. You can see we we went over it for a few years back when we built this building and the the DPW building. But see, oh, there you go. Okay. So, yeah, I can't see. So that blue space is our existing debt service. The debt service at 10% is that top line. You can see, I just mentioned, we went over it a little bit when we built this building. But what happens is that this is, most of our debt is exempt debt. So what that means is that basically, as it gets paid off, the tax impact, we will get tax relief basically. Right, because it's outside of Prop 2.5. As that gets paid down, our taxes decrease by that amount. And so if you don't replace it, and you let it go for a long period of time, you're gonna have a big spike in your taxes once you issue that new debt. So the key is to try to time this so that you don't have those big spikes. There's about 4.1 million difference between in FY 27 between that 10% sort of metric and where we would be roughly speaking. So for debt service that we're going to have, no matter what we do, whenever we issue this debt, there's going to be a big spike in this chart here. So
Steve, did
Yeah.
Tri-County talk to you about when the debt service is gonna hit Medfield or for that project? It's a $300 million school, so I didn't.
yeah, Frank, do you know the answer to that?
So in breakdown there, I think that we'll start fiscal 27.
Yeah. So the next,
Just out of curiosity, the revenue increases, is that just based on inflation?
yeah, every year our property taxes go up by at least 2.5%.
Yep.
And there's also new growth that gets added in there, so maybe like 3% a year, kind of revenue goes up. There's a bit of an increase every year. Next slide. So this is the bad news, basically. It's kind of just pulled it all together. And basically, the top part of this, the top two rows are basically borrowing without, if we don't get into the MSBA program. Okay, these are the dollar amounts that we would borrow. And then what I've done is I have, because I can't get everything on a slide, I took an average of the average. I modeled each one of these each rate. I modeled what the tax increase was for 3.5, a 4, 4.5, and 5. But I just averaged them for this slide, okay? So that's what you have. So, and then the bottom part of this is really just if we are lucky enough to get into the MSBA program, you can see it's almost like a $200-300 difference on the tax rate. And where we fall on the construction cost side of this, my gut tells me you're going to be towards the high end of that range, closer to the 800 by the time we get that further down the road. So the next slide. I wasn't planning on going through all of these, but this is just gives you the individual tax increases for the different borrowing rates. That's all this does. And I've averaged them, the ranges up above is with MSBA funding, without it for both for the $700 and the $800 scenarios. So this is 575 enrollment. The next one takes you through this is the next one is 500 enrollment. And so you can see you get it basically is I think it's the slide you probably should look at is the one two back, which is this one here, because I think this sort of gives you a snapshot of everything. The last thing, so I wasn't planning on going through each one of these for you, but you have it for information. Just for comparison purposes, we were at 852. Because people will be anchored in that number, you know, of what we voted on, 852. And then Frank, if you could keep going forward to slide 21. This just gives you the details of what makes up that tax increase. It's based on principal and interest. The two columns there's a total principal and interest, total interest, the first year property tax increase, what our current taxes are, and what the new taxes would be. So you can see these. Without MSBA funding for the 575 enrollment, your $1,300 average increase, you know, almost 10%, you know, increase. So the difference between, you know, I mean, that's significant for a lot of people. So, the next slide is, yeah, this just keeps going through the different enrollment scenarios. Then if you go to the next slide, so this I just wanted to bring to your attention. We did a tremendous amount of work on the last project. A lot of detail was studied. This is our website. It's a subcommittee, that little red box down there, subcommittee section. And this is all the things that we had. We had a lot of detail on all these topics. There's a 74-page Q&A document if you want to dive into all the questions that were asked of us. You may get asked some more questions. You know, there were, as you can see, there's a lot of different topics that were studied, and there's a lot of information there if you want to look at it. That's all I wanted to just bring to your attention. So I don't know. I think this might be the only place where all of this is pulled together. I think the school committee had certain things on their website. But towards the end, when we sort of got involved, we sort of pulled it all together. So that's really, there's a bunch of appendices. I'm not going to go through if you're interested in them. They're in the materials, but basically they're, you know, there's a lot of detail on how these numbers are calculated. Basically, they're debt service calculations for each scenario. So that's all it does. So it's, again, this was really just meant to sort of, you know, give you a sense of what are the key drivers of costs. How important is enrollment to the overall picture? Does it really make that big of a difference? You can see, you go back, like one thing I just want to bring your attention, go back, Frank, to slide, keep going back to the cost slide, the summary cost slide. Yeah, this one. So if you look at, even look at the difference between the 500 and the 450 and 475. So that difference in enrollment makes up like a $2 million difference on the 700, and or $2 or $3 million difference. And on the line without MSBA funding, and it's a couple $1 million with MSBA funding. So we could have a lot of debate about enrollment, but big picture, that's the impact that you're talking about.
See that, I think like simple math, right? Going from far right hand, dark blue box at 1214 to left hand side at 1344, right? $130. But the delta when you work your way down to MSBA funding is what that 32, it's $260. So this idea of like, if going with MSBA forces into slightly higher enrollment, it's still cheaper than going without their involvement potentially. So by a.
Yeah,
by a
that's an interesting
function of
point,
that,
yeah,
like, you know, two
Yeah.
people.
yeah, no, that's an interesting point. It's gonna be, I mean, you'll have a tough decision to make when we get to December, depending on what happens, with the MSBA, right? That'll be, because you can see its impact is, right, taxes and, so anyway, any other questions? I don't want to take up any more of your meeting time. Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about the AAA bond rating of the town.
Yeah.
At Warren Committee.
Yeah.
Based on the timing that we would need to take out this loan. And where we are now. We kind of got it as a big picture goal, but I don't know if is it feasible to get to that rating by the time we take out this loan?
Do you mind talking really fast on a high level? Why we're at this rating and how we would get to the next rating?
That's kind of my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
We have to do certain criteria.
I mean,
but I
it's,
just can't think of what they are.
it's gonna be it's gonna be a tough leap to get there, I think, in my opinion, it's. They look at things like, we're headed in the right direction, but, we're trying to do the right thing, we're putting money into reserve accounts. They look at that very closely, they look at our obligations for pensions and for OPEB liabilities. And all those things, they look at everything. They look at how many, we're on a second year now balancing our budget without using free cash. That's something they look at.
Okay.
So we had years where we were balancing our budget by using $2 million of every cash. And they noted that in the last, review they did. So, if we stay disciplined and, there's a chance, but I don't want to get people excited about it because I think it's going to be difficult to, Westwood's situation, their AAA is
Yeah.
totally different than ours. We have very small commercial, revenue source here in town. So,
It would be, in my opinion, it'd be naive to rely on it.
yeah,
The rating agency has every incentive to drop you,
Yeah.
very little incentive to raise you. So the ratings would come down like a rock and to raise it back up. It's kind of.
yeah, certainly I would not do any planning.
No,
assuming
I
that
just
would
wanted to
happen.
understand why we were in this place.
Yeah,
What
That's a good
was
question.
Like to get there.
yeah.
Hey, Steve, first of all, thank you. This is insanely awesome. I know you've had a busy week too, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Me too.
Till Monday. I think as we've had these committee meetings, I've been kind of like pounding on this, like cost, we gotta socialize costs, get this in front of it. I think this is a helpful first step. I think one of the things that worries me as we think about that model is prospective interest rates. And when I talk to people, it's a tough concept, but sometimes if you can equate it to somebody's own home, right, it makes it a little bit more tangible. And I say to them is that listen, the town has essentially pick your principal balance in one of those 12 boxes. But we as a town effectively have an adjustable rate mortgage for one of those balances. And every day that the interest rate moves, your exposure moves. And I don't think there's too many people in town that pulled a 1 month arm when they took out their mortgage. But effectively, everyone has one worth of whatever the denominator is, 4,000, 5,000 tax paper, whatever it is. You do the math. You have an adjustable rate mortgage for your share of that changes every day. And it's this huge future risk that if you were in business, right, you go out and take a forward-dated hedge or something like that. And or the other way to think about it is if you were an individual and you knew you had to move into a new house 3 years from now, right? And it's this weird thing. If you had to do it, you would have a budget, right? And you would say, all right, well, if I have to downsize from a 4-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, you would make those trade-offs. Steve showed earlier, the costs are largely fixed. No matter what we decide, the kind of big picture is largely fixed. And so we have inflation, we have interest rates to manage, and we have this bill coming due. And it's kind of if any one reasonable person was in that perspective where you knew you had to move 3 years from now, what would you be doing? You would be paying down your existing debt as fast as you could, knowing that you're gonna have new debt coming on, and or you'd be saving like crazy to try to save for down payment. I think this is where been like 20 years since I audited Northeastern and had the governmental / not-for-profit accounting. But like, it's like, the question in my mind is always like, what are the constructs within, our financial kind of envelope to start saving now? And I know it's harder.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I know it's something that Christine is thinking through. Yeah, you're right. If we were a corporation, we'd just take out some interest rate swaps and hedge this risk and fix it, right? But we're a municipality. And doing that for a project that is just in its planning stages now. There's all sorts of issues with that, right? Because we set a budget every year, we tax people on that budget, and there's all sorts of challenges with that. I think this Hingham model might have some, it's worth looking at, I think, what they've done in Hingham.
I have that as a question too. Can you talk high level about what that looks like and how that would?
Well, I just found out about it a couple of days ago, so I haven't studied it too much, but from what I understand, they have created a tax mitigation stabilization fund because they have real big issues. They have like a $6 million Prop 2 capital override. They have construction buildings that they're putting in multiple buildings, I think. So they have this big mountain to climb on taxes. And they have tried to smooth out that effect on the average citizen through this tax mitigation stabilization fund. The concept is kind of like taking things like excess free cash and putting it in the stabilization fund over time, so that when you get to those years where the tax spike happens, you have money that you can, basically reduce the tax rate that's in the stabilization fund. That's my 2-day-old understanding of what they're doing.
Is it similar to what you're saying that we were previously doing with free cash, but you're kind of putting it in a separate fund to be?
Yeah, I mean, we take free cash today and put it in different stabilization funds for particular purposes.
Right.
We have the capital stabilization fund, we have the municipal building stabilization fund. But those are real needs today.
Right.
So it's sort of, we don't have a lot of, as a town, we don't generate a lot of free cash. And how we use it, you need to kind of get consensus on that, and when it gets voted, everything gets voted at town meeting, so. It's something to worth a look at,
But my biggest worry as we go into this project is, we go down the path where we do the best possible job that we can. And the cost is $1,500. Because we look out a couple of years, I think at work, we have 1.2 million square feet of construction ongoing right now. And I take the over on the 800, as I sit here today, who knows what will happen in the future? That's what I'm seeing. Tony, curious, how you guys see it in your business, but it's, I worry that we're gonna show up and it's gonna be $1,500 per grand. And I also look forward, again, what I see in my business in terms of inflation with wages and I know that bill's gonna come due for us too at some point with, probably the average wage rate in town being less than what we've seen for, CPI in the last couple of years. People are gonna be underwater from a notional perspective in terms of their real wage rate. Right, and that bill's gonna, all that's gonna come due all at the same time. And so when you take the wage inflation that's gonna be needed to keep people level, plus $1,500 for your school, you're gonna show up with a $2,500 tax increase. People are gonna say no. And we don't have the time to start over. For a fifth time. So the question is and this is where I think collectively between this group, the warrant committee, I joke when you know, the committees go back and forth, like, oh, that's their problem. It's like, it's gotta be all of our problem.
Right.
Because this is so intertwined, the financials and like all the decisions we'll make.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's, you know, we gotta thread the needle in order to get this right, and it starts right here on this page in terms of how do we make sure that we don't show up with something in the future that's unacceptable, and that's completely outside of our control. And the only way to do it is start planning for it now, and we gotta be creative in how we do that.
Right, yeah. Well, I think, you know, there's a lot to think about, and, you know, I agree, there's just, you know. That's a risk that, you know, I'm sure will keep a lot of people up, you know, what's that number gonna be like in 2-3 years, whenever we get to a point where you're gonna put it to a vote. So, you're right, but there's a lot of checkpoints and decision points along the way. I guess Mike will tell you, there's all sorts of, you know, estimates that get done by cost estimators, you know, at multiple points in time. You'll have chances to adjust and react and, you know,
But even then, you know, what's happened over the last, since 2021, just the costs alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Couldn't just predict.
it's a totally different environment now, right? I mean,
You could have.
Yeah, well, after 2020, probably a little bit, sure. But generally, probably not the increases we've seen in construction, you know, just overall.
Yeah.
So this is a really great start, Steve. I really appreciate, I think just at those point, this is the start of us educating everybody that, hey, this is probably what it costs, with or without NSBA. We have options here, and that's, there's a big range here. Now, venture it's probably, you know, it's going to be towards the higher end of this range.
yeah, I would agree with
Because we're still a couple years away, right? But I think sharing this data is critical to say, this is what's coming. And as a town, you know, we just need to be aware of that. If Bill's right, at some point, we could do everything perfect and still get voted down, which would be devastating, but for our kids, really, so.
Well, not only this, but.
And our educators.
2027, we got Dry Valley Bill, right? Yeah. So we have to be very aware of not only this bill coming to our taxpayers, but other projects.
And as well as the operating budget. I mean, it's been,
Yeah.
we haven't had an override since 2018, so.
So I joked somebody that it would be like kind of. Like seriously, I feel like you're putting a 300, like, we should have been paying for this building for the last like 10 years. So every year that we go by that we don't pay for the building, it only makes it sound worse. So like, I don't think people would go for it, but if you put $300 in tax base next year through this, whether it's through a mechanism or some other way, like, yeah, it would require override. But if you showed up then when the building was gonna come due and you had, you know, $6-7 million in the bank, and could take 20% out of the tax increase, we get a down payment, getting back to the house, everybody's house example. If you're gonna buy a house, you'd have a down payment on it. It just takes the sting out of it. It makes it a lot more palatable when you actually get to the city.
Yeah, things to look into, yeah. All right,
Any other questions for Steve?
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, super helpful. Next, let's go to packets that we got last week. The ask was for everyone to kind of go through them, come with some questions. I'll open it up to the school committee members, people to ask school committee members, really. And I guess Michelle really.
You can
ask you. Yeah, right. That'd be impressive if you knew the answers, but then that surprised before. So, any questions? You gotta have confidence.
Oh, I have, yes, I have many, but I want to give other people a chance.
I'll start, just generally, and I'll ask one and then we'll get. So Michelle. So September, I'm looking at the September 13th, 2020, letter to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
Which kind of summarizes the rest of the stuff that was given to us. So this is after the failed vote.
Correct.
And basically it was, again, the whole school committee wrote this letter to the selectmen. I guess my main question here, just looking at your bullet point more than anything else, is it the school committee's desire to change grade configuration? It kind of implies that, but doesn't outright say what it should be.
So I think this was included in there because there was so much, I shouldn't say I think, this was included in there because there was so much work done on the previous project in regards to grade configuration. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just coming in here, we being the SBC, coming in here and saying 4-5, that's it, we have to do it like that. Given that there was a lot of advantages to the 3-4-5 model as part one, but also advantages to the campus model, which was going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 together. So when we look at that, that was a request because there are a lot of advantages from an educational standpoint for the kids and the children's Medfield to be able to do that. So on a high level, yes.
Yeah, that's what I assume.
Yes, but at the same time, like, you know, my understanding was the reason that it got nixed last time was because of cost. So that's a trade-off that I think we have to understand.
Sure. That was one of the main reasons for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. We did look at building a 3-grade school last time prior. And the costs were a third higher, but they were probably 25%, if I had to guess in my head, higher than kind of what the projections were for a 2-grade school. And as a committee last time, and I can't remember exactly, but I think cost was a large part of that. It's like, hey, we're gonna throw something in front of the town, this is gonna be hard to pass, and we're changing the grades, right? So, that's there. So generally speaking, the school committee wanted, you know, unified setting, meaning the campus type up through 5th grade-ish, if they could, and also, possible grade configuration. Redoing the grade configurations.
So just because this has come up in our communications subcommittee, because we're trying to get information out. So we just sort of want to be clear as to what it is we are moving forward with, because it still says 3 to 5. So are you saying you want to still try for a 3 to 5? Or it's going to be 4 or 5? Like,
I mean, again, I think that's a conversation for us to figure out, right? Because as we just learned, the cost is going to be probably a lot more than I think a lot of people are prepared to deal with. But at the same time, we are in a situation where I think we do need to take a holistic look between K through 5 and the advantages that come with having 3, 4, 5 together, or you know, 2 schools that maybe are able to better share resources than Memorial and Dale can right now, right? That was one of the advantages of having 2, 3, 4, 5 at Wheelock, with the multitude of advantages from an educational standpoint and a resource sharing standpoint and a transition standpoint, right? There was just a lot of advantages to that. So if we're sitting here talking about ways we can improve our current system, I just want to make sure we're having these conversations around these things that we found last time were going to be advantageous to our education, to our public education system for our kids.
is there a place where you mapped out the advantages to having those many grades together, like actually listed them out, what they were, what the resources are, what the advantage, is there a document somewhere that lists that out?
I don't know, Steve or Jeff, I believe there is. We talked it multiple times at the community forums. I remember at Dale Street. I'd have to look to find out where it is, and
There is, I think we would have to find that.
yeah, I'll try to look for that. But yeah, we had, because that was a topic of conversation of many of the meetings that we had, primarily the forums that were there at Dale Street. And we did multiple times go through the, the different topics that would be advantageous to have.
Apparently, if you go on our website and then you go to explore, there's a whole section on new elementary schools, 2017 and 2021,
Okay,
and everything we've ever done is on there. It's all there.
it was all listed out.
It was a bit anecdotal, if I said that wrong, but you get my point. Meaning like less transitions was listed as a good thing, but then some of the feedback we got was the transitions are great for kids. You know what I mean? So
Yes, yeah.
you kind of got to read it between the lines a little bit, like everybody felt a little bit differently about some of the stuff, right?
Right.
So,
Well, it's usually, that's the thing about grade configuration, there's no perfect model, there's pros and cons, no matter how you do it, and it's sort of prioritizing the pro you want.
sure.
But
Yeah, that was what I remember. Other than the size of the building, which was obviously, a con, the rest of the stuff, there was a lot of discussion. And most of it came from the educators, so I kind of listened to them, like this, I can use better shared resources, kids will have same busing for 4 years, all that stuff. But then there was an argument made on the other side that said, it was really good for kids to do transition over. So.
And it also freed up space at Memorial, so it allowed us to make that a pre-K K school. And not have grade 1 over there, so it allowed us to transition with kindergarten, offer more preschool, like we're adding a preschool classroom for Wheelock next year because we were
Right.
out of space, so it allowed to do all of that and really make that a true early childhood center. That was
Okay.
a big reason behind it as well.
Did the campus model end up being like a compromise in a way? Was it like kind of you get the advantage? I didn't follow the process as closely last time, so I don't know. I'm asking. It was kind of like you get some of those advantages without the like additional cost of building a larger school with an additional grade level, but the proximity to the other school, was that
for sure?
was that part of the thinking?
I wouldn't say it was all of it. A lot of it had to do with. Again, not to rehash, but it was a greenfield site. We didn't have to transition the kids until the school was ready.
Okay.
Things of that nature really came into it as well. But generally speaking, that was part of it, part of 20 reasons really. But that was high on the educators list and really in the school committee saying this would be beneficial to, the educators and the kids, so. Other questions?
I had some questions about, some things that were in here. Some I had comments, but I don't think this is probably the time for those, but, how did you come up? So on page 10, the policy recommended class size. I'm assuming that's the school committee policy. I just want to make sure that's correct. And then there's this target class size column. So my question around these, obviously the current average class size is based on data, so that's kind of a but my question is, how did, and maybe you don't know, I mean, I know at times in school districts, the school committee policies on recommended class size are just kind of passed down year after year and not really looked at, but are those the policies? How long have those policies been in place for your class sizes? How did the school committee come up with the target, or how was the target class size determined? And what educational research was this based on?
Just basically the reason.
So the policy recommended class size, I'm assuming is the school committee policy recommended class size.
Yes.
How long have these been static? Because I know in a lot of districts, it's just passed down year to year, and it's one of those things. I'm not saying this to be insulting, it's just that can happen in districts, so I just didn't know if this has been these recommended class sizes for how long, and then the next column with the target class size, I was curious how those numbers were picked and what educational research that was based on.
So from a policy, school committee policy standpoint, I'd have to look at our policy handbook to tell you when the last time that specific policy had been reviewed. I can also say we're reviewing all of our policies right now. So while that one is not probably upcoming, so.
I just think
That one
it's
I
worth
can tell you.
noting because as Robert was talking earlier about the very high increase of mental health and social emotional needs for kids, the rise in autism, the rise in needs with students with disabilities, and the increased needs for some of those kids. If these have been, like when you do that research, if you see this has been in existence for 10, 15 years,
Right.
as Steve, when he was giving us the tour of Dale, like, or Mr. Gunham, like you would, education has changed. So I'm just curious around that. And then if you could find out how those target class sizes, I know as we were saying, obviously less would always be better, but like in seriousness, if we're gonna try to get the school committee through and this is a target class size. I know there's the recommended and then the target. I think we have to really be clear about why that's the target, what research we're basing that on. Because if we're gonna say there should be 18 to 20 kids in a kindergarten class. I find in education, because we were all educated, sometimes people that are not in education feel like, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that they are just as knowledgeable about education because they were educated.
Correct.
So if we're gonna have this, I just wanna be able to say, like, this is, we looked at area schools, we did some research on this. There, I mean, there's, as you know,
Yeah.
Jeff, like through our doctoral studies, like there's, there's early education studies. So I just think, I think this is gonna have, I think we have to explain it because I think people have an idea of, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone's opinion, but I just think people have an idea without really understanding the logic and the thinking behind it, if that
From my
makes sense.
recollection, again, we did this a long time ago, that the target class size came from feedback of teachers and all the groups that we had, visioning sessions and all that. I think that's where it came from. And it was we're trying to do as a target class size is get below the policy size, because the policy was low. I mean, it's an older policy. And we were trying to get it into a meaningful, I mean, if you look at the research, and you can Google like the Tennessee Star study that happened, that's like the famous one, where it's like 14 and under is what really makes a difference. From 14 above, it wouldn't make a difference, but from a teacher, every kid makes a difference. So I think it's important to keep it as low as you can. And I believe the 18 to 20 and the 19 to 21 and 20 to 23 came out of conversations with them because the educational consultant from the company we're using met with all the groups of teachers during that process. So, I mean, there was a lot of teacher feedback involved in that. Steve held forums with the teachers, with the consultant to get all that information. So I believe that's where it came from, but I have to check. I don't know.
Yeah, I just think when we're trying to determine the size, when we get to that point and the square footage and the classroom and the number of kids in the classroom.
Yeah.
When we're trying to say, is it 24, is it 23, is it 22? I just think we gotta be really solid in how we're determining that and why. So that way, when we're standing up there trying to explain this. I know there's numbers and there's business, but there's like the.
Especially looking at the size of it's looked at, right? So,
The model all points back to.
yeah, sure.
What's this that we're
One more
talking about?
classroom, at $800 a square foot times 900 square feet, you do the math, right?
I appreciate your asking the question because you're pointing out the fact that we need to have that really buttoned up for the communities to understand. I'm curious, given what you guys do though, your gut on the numbers that you're looking at there.
Yeah, I mean, what Jeff said is completely, I agree. I couldn't agree more with that. I'm oftentimes in the position where I have to sell class sizes to families, right? Like, oh, your kid's in a class size of 25 and they're in kindergarten, and the family's like, this is crazy. Like, I've never heard of this before. So I'm in that position where I have to sell it a lot of time. I do believe it though. Like I think that's sound research. And it's been the same way for a while, right? Like that research hasn't changed. Once you hit that number, like 14, 15, whatever it is, and then you go above that, it's a factor in a child's education, but it's not the determining factor, right? It's not gonna like determine whether they make progress or are successful in the classroom. I oftentimes have these conversations with families. It's not just a conversation that I'm having. I'm not just like spewing information. It's the facts, and I believe them. I don't think that the class sizes here they're not unreasonable. I think that if you did update this, they would in fact probably like go up a little bit closer to that 24 number. I think it's the direction that a lot of districts are heading.
We just caution that because again, when Jeff was saying, and you're right, that's the data says that, and I respect those studies. The only thing I think we have to really take in consideration here, and I think we see this all over news or everything, is that the education in 2023 is even different than it was in 2019. So when we look at all these different variety of factors that we have, when we talk about these kids, it's just walking into a walking into a day to day. It's not, and I think Meredith brought up a great, quote that you hear, that everybody's been educated. So a lot of people will look at it and say, well, I went to school and there were 26 kids in my class of 27 kids, but you know, there was other things that educators might have been doing back then. That they would never think about doing now as well. So well, I respect that. I do think, you know, being an educator at heart, having a wife that's an educator, it is, the more it's creeping over 20, even if 4th and 5th grade, the numbers get up there. So I would hope, your point might be taken, it might go up, but I would hope and urge the school committee to make sure that it's not creeping up that way, that if anything, it's kind of moving down here, especially with all the needs that we have.
Yes, technology makes it goes up or down. Like one of the things I think through with this is that, right, the good people of Medfield in 1940 built a structure that lasted us 80 something years at this point. Right, and I hope the structure we built lasts another 80 years. And so, right, we can't build for 2027, we have to build for 2047, 2057, 2067. So as you look forward, like, I mean, the answer is in probably can't know, but I don't know if technology actually moves it up or moves it down, maybe that's cool.
It's more to monitor.
Yeah.
I would just say, like, in terms of this, I think you also have to look at the number of IEPs and average per classroom, the number of ELs per classroom. What are the outside supports that you have for these kids outside of the classroom? Because yes, you can have higher numbers in classes if the needs and the individual needs of those kids. Because when you have to take into accommodations and things like that, if kids on 504s and IEPs and those and health plans, allergies, all of that alone. And the more you add of those kids, keeping it all straight. This kid gets extended time on this. This kid gets a movement break every 3 minutes. Okay. This kid is supposed to have, okay, they need a sensory break in that corner. Like it's, and so every time that all of those things have to be addressed, there's 20, however many other kids in the room that have to take a moment because the teacher's paying attention to someone else at this level. So I think it's just thinking about whatever we decide, or you just, well, not us, but you guys decide with these numbers. I just think it's important to not just have the teacher feedback. I think that's key, but maybe even more, I know we're talking about communications, like parent feedback, and then maybe even using MCAS scores to look at kids that came from different classrooms, the size of that classroom. Why are things, I mean, I saw it with my own kid in one classroom, like I think it's interesting to consider different factors in looking at this, because I know there are other topics in relation to the schools that are hot topics within this community for different reasons. So I just think we have to like get everybody on this page, because if everybody agrees we need this much space for these kids in this kind of setting, the numbers are going to take care of themselves. Because if we can agree that we need a school this big and this many classrooms, because this is what we believe how many classrooms should be in that space, all you're then looking at is maybe the gym and some of those other common spaces, because everything else will have already been worked out. So I sort of think if we focus on the kids and then build out, the number will, I don't know. I just think it's gonna be important. So that was like my main, the different teams, going from 2 teams to greater teams. I think it makes sense if the grades get bigger. I don't know. I have questions around the need for smaller teams within the grades that's outlined on page 13. It kind of talks about middle schools have teams too, obviously, at Blake, and it's important. I just think thinking through some of that a little bit, I had questions around, and then I know we did a math curriculum when they were talking, when you broke this down by different subject areas, you know, the language labs for the world languages, I mean, AP exams, you have to do a speaking component, all of that makes sense to me. But my question when we got to the math part, sorry, I know we did the pilot this year and tried 3 different math curriculums, and I know different math curriculums use sort of different modalities of instruction, especially as you get older. So I think just having an idea too, and looking at the curriculum, and I don't know what, you know, Dr. Powers had planned, Christine has planned, and continuing to explore the different curriculums or how often you do audits for different subject matters. But thinking about, to your point, Bill, about like we have to educate and think about 2057, 2067, like what curriculums are we considering, and what do we need to think about in terms of space and things like that, and what this school needs? Because I saw a lot about like not having a fitness room, having a larger gym to have multiple classes in there, having 4 offices for the wellness department. That seemed high to me personally, but just thinking about like what part of this education, like which parts of these disciplines are most important to us. And then those disciplines, not that they're not all important. I know teachers will get upset if I say one area is less important than the other, but I just think it's important to think about this space that we're allocating and why, and then what like math tables, like the white tables they can all write on, like all of that thing, I think it has to come into play because that's also going to determine how big of the classroom and all of those kind of factors. So I think the curriculum has to be a decent amount, at least at one meeting of our conversation and thinking about really what the goals are at the elementary level. Because we do have some struggling scores in ELA in particular as they get older. So how do we help those things as they're younger, and what do the younger grades need to set those up?
In combination with the curriculum, I think you have to look at teaching practices, because you're exactly right, Meredith, that it's, you know, what's the curriculum there, and that's really important. But I think no matter what the curriculum is decided going forward with math, you're still looking to say, okay, right now, visioning ahead, is math workshop really the best thing to do? Where you're splitting kids into smaller groups, you have the space for that. So I think the curriculum is vitally important. But I also think looking ahead to say, to Bill's point, you know, looking ahead in 10, 15 years, can we see what it's going to look like? Can we envision it at that time? Because that will help us with the space too. So I would really encourage looking at what we project the teaching practice to look like along with it. Because I think that's really important.
You didn't mention anything about a librarian, and the kids don't have library class per se at Dale Street. Am I understanding that right? And even in a new school where we might have a good sized library and an adequate selection of books, we're not envisioning library as a special. Is that right?
Yeah, so right now, like when I came to Dale Street, because of the number of specials and obviously the time on learning that we need with the content areas,
Right.
We have to make sure that we're leading that. So right now we have a library media specialist that actually Dr. Narson had helped put in to the budget a few years back. So what that person does now, Julie Lowry is her name, she's the makerspace kind of teacher, but
Yeah.
also in the library. So in the schedule currently that we have, that was revamped for this year, is that all the classes visit the library for a 30-minute, section per week. So it's not library for a special, the teacher will bring them down there. And then that's the time that they'll look for books that they're using during their readers workshop time. And also if they're doing any research or anything like that, looking to get any type of literature for that.
Okay, so there isn't a instructional time where a librarian might instruct the kids on doing decimal research,
No.
resources, none of
No,
that. Okay.
No, because right now, like just projecting out and look what we're doing, we also have a technology integrationist, which is dealing more with that type of stuff, technology wise, looking at the digital footprints, again.
So
more
your
so
technology people are doing that instructed.
Yeah, they're instructing on, again, what's being safe, at our level, all kids have cell phones, they're just beginning to get them.
Yeah, and is the technology person doing that with the classroom teacher, or
Yes.
is that?
Yeah,
Like,
just
when
like
I
the
was teaching
makerspace.
third grade, we had coding as a special.
Yeah,
With technology
Yeah.
teacher came in and taught the kids coding.
Yeah.
That was a special in the week for third grade, and
Yeah.
they're trying to move it to more, but.
yeah, so nowadays, just a great point, that shows I know Jeff and I will be talking at future meetings about education. Nowadays, but what happens is if Joe Ahern, who's our technology integrationist, is using like a Spiro coding and stuff like that, ultimately we want the teacher in the room with them because Joe's gonna be there to help out. Teacher might not know as much as Joe does, but then down the road, if you can integrate that into a science lesson, the teacher can do that. It's only better for them. And the same thing with Makerspace, where Julie's working with the classroom teachers, if they're doing an artifact project around Greek mythology that's in their unit, the hope is that they can break that makerspace. It's not just a space, it goes into their classroom as well. So the makerspace person is in, the classroom teachers in with the makerspace. They flip-flop that. So they're with Joe, like grade 4 might be with them for the month of September, and then grade 5 might be with
And they get-
Julie.
And then they get PE twice a week.
They get PE twice a week, so they have one
So
30-minute
art,
section.
PE
So they have-
twice.
Yeah, so they have art, health, 2 PEs, 2 world languages. So
I appreciate, yeah, let's,
Sorry.
no, I'm never gonna try to purposely, but you guys are gonna have almost a whole meeting, to discuss just this, so, and I'm only trying to just move us along a little bit, so I apologize if I offend anybody. Are there any other questions regarding please.
I have a general question, similar to the Dell Street education program, is there a document for the other grades similar to this that we should be reviewing? As we think of it, this is only done.
Yes, MSBA required us to do this, and they actually give you the parameters of what you have to speak about in terms of the the scheduling, the different, curriculum areas, so then this is what they.
This is their album.
They gave you the outline and, the educators.
So do we, pardon me, because anybody in the public schools with them? But do we have something as far as educational that to share from Memorial and we lost?
So curriculum maps. And those kind of
Curriculum,
things? Yeah, we
yeah.
have all
And
that. So would that be helpful for you folks to see the curriculum?
I think we're talking about elementary education here.
Yeah.
So I think we can't look just at 4-5.
Yeah.
So I would appreciate having some of that information.
At least for 3. At a minimum, in my opinion, because honestly, I'm somebody who doesn't know a lot about this stuff. It might help with the grade configuration.
But I just heard
Yeah.
Dr. Marston mention the whole additional pre-K over at Memorial that I didn't even tune into. And we are, like understanding what that strategy is.
Sure.
And I think part of that maybe, okay.
I think it's great. Okay, good. Then move on. All right, I think this will be a quick one, because we've already discussed it kind of pretty good at length, but I'm sure we're gonna get a question or two on Monday about, the $250,000, one article asking for that. Just high level, I think, everyone in this room understands it. My gut tells me, so we're gonna say, hey, why do you need $250,000? We already appropriated $250,000 last year for the committee. We haven't spent any of it yet. And my answer will be, or should be, and I want opinions on this, please, would be, look at in December of 2023, we find out if we get MSBA help or not. We are, no matter what, determined to build a new school for our, and get a proposal in front of the town. That to the best of our ability. So we're basically dead in the water, in my opinion, from December to the next town meeting of May, where we can ask for money. And then and generally that $250,000 helps bridge the gap, because then we'll have $500,000 to hire consultants to go back and look at what we did last time. What can we reuse, right? What do we have to do again, which isn't hopefully very much, but some things I think, in my opinion, I want to redo. And then, basically move forward from there. Through up until May, where we have some sort of a plan to hire an OPM, hire a design, whatever it may be in the next steps.
I think it's important to note that the goal isn't to spend $500,000.
It's there too.
The goal and the money would go back, right?
Yeah.
Like, the goal is to have this as an excess of 250 that we have right now. So that we don't have to stop progress if our bill is 260,
Yeah,
right?
no, I really appreciate that. That's perfect, because I don't think that. I think it's really easy to spend that money if we have a direction plan. But until then, we have some, I'm sure we're gonna send, the subcommittee's gonna go next, and hopefully we'll have some things to say. But that's a big point.
It's really July 24, right? So that's when the budget year starts, so that was appropriate.
It would be July, yeah.
I think you want to have some ammunition on what consultant fees are. And how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I got some of those, we got, anyways, I'll have them on hand.
So hypothetically, kind of-
Yeah, it was exactly, so a minimum of 1.25 million. For feasibility. I think you'd be able to this. Okay. Any other points?
So Mike, I would just also keep in mind that the MSBA has already reimbursed the town for the $1 million feasibility study from the last project. 197,000 change, 397,806. out of that 1 million.
Now, if we get back into the program, correct me if I'm wrong, but they won't pay for
They
that.
will not pay, they will not reimburse the, I don't think those things.
I think the communications committee just added sort of to that same thing that Jeff was saying, is for people to understand that, yes, we did a lot of things. And we can look at that and use it, but we have to update it all and move forward. And,
Yeah,
you know, so that they're not thinking if you just take it, that we've got to update it.
same thing with this, right?
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
this was done in 2021,
Mhm.
and we have some questions on it, so it's.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Some of it's good stuff that'll continue to be used and it will change, but, so why don't we move right into the subcommittee?
Okay, Bill, Teresa, Bob and I have had 3 meetings for the communications subcommittee. And we're on a track. We've done a lot of thinking and brainstorming about how can we reach out to the community and keep them abreast of everything that's going on. At the same time, how are we getting information back from the community? So we just keep talking about it. It's 2 things we're trying to do here, is keep everyone updated, as many people as we can, but also gather as much information as we can so that everyone in the community is on the same page as we move along. And at the moment, there are 2 big things we're thinking about, which is starting a newsletter, which we would post on the school building committee webpage and also pass out and update. And we've been actually brainstorming the kind of questions people would want to ask us that we would answer in the newsletter, and the kind of things we want to tell people and put in the newsletter. And the second thing is sort of how to kick us off and let people know we started. So we came up with this idea of doing a very short survey as a kickoff piece. And the focus would be, we know 3 things from the last vote. We know some people voted yes, some people voted no, and some people didn't vote. And we know more people voted no than yes, but that's it. Right, everything else is guesses, and you think you know why they voted yes, you think they know why they didn't vote or no, but we don't really know. So we wanted to introduce ourselves in a couple sentences and then ask people those kind of questions, and Teresa has been working up a sample survey that we sort of put together. And the idea would be that everybody here would take a couple of groups, and we're going to put together a list and a chart. You'd sign up for a group, and you would somehow get in touch with that group. So if you already know, and make it easy, and you would explain we're on the road, we've started, we're going to kick ourselves off, and we would like you to tell your members to do this quick survey for us. We've also been talking about, you know, you can sign up for town alerts, right, on phone. And we can make the school building committee, you could sign up and get alerts, and then we give information to you. So we're just trying to, you know, start ourselves off and get ourselves moving in terms of being out there. We are looking at a Medfield Day booth. Though we've learned, I'm going to give that update.
The people who previously have, some of you may know this, they get to sign up in May and maybe get a better location. Booths remaining are then opened up on July 1. So on July 1, we can work at getting a booth somewhere. It might not be a prime location, but we'd like to have a presence there because there are a lot of the town comes down there that day. If you've ever been down there, it's like wall to wall people. It's a nice day. Sure. We think it's a great place to be.
We just wanted to get your thoughts. I'm going to hand over to Teresa so she can scroll and show you where we wanted to get your thoughts on these questions and see if you're willing as a group to help us pick up by connecting with groups and sharing the survey.
Yeah, and again, we see the survey approach as just a way to be a little interactive, get some feedback. None of the surveys would we want them to be very long, they need to be really quick hits. And it's kind of a very iterative process. I think even tonight, we learned some great things. We could pick out one particular thing and go and then tease that out some more, or tease out a particular survey closer to Medfield Day. And we kind of felt like the first survey, we really just wanted to start to understand the point of view of our town and our community. And so, we'd have just a very quick intro paragraph, making sure they were aware that we're the school building committee has kicked off. And that we're gonna be doing this and engaging.
And I'm sorry, how are we distributing the survey? You mentioned like,
So
we're gonna get into groups.
there are all these groups in town, there are school groups, and then there is a senior center, and then there's new in town, and there's, Legion, there's just different groups, and in the past, the hospital and other organizations that we're trying to get information out have sort of made lists of the groups, and we're compiling those lists. And then we thought we'd just make this big chart of all the ways that we could connect and find people in the community, and that we'd all take a few and then introduce yourself to the group, explain what we're trying to do, and then and start by asking them to complete the survey.
So hand out survey.
Hand it out, or we're even gonna have just a little QR code that.
And it's really, and it could be that outreach to them is, you might be very active with another community group already. And so it's, hey, at your next meeting, or can you distribute the link to your membership to help publicize that we're doing it. We're doing PR.
Yeah.
So they were all kind of chipping in on that PR piece. And really what we also want to do through this and through that PR piece is to get people to sign up, as Carolyn mentioned, about the alerts. Because then if we can grow our number of people that have subscribed on the town website to follow us and follow the SBC through the town website, then anytime we want to do a news post or anything like that, we can use the town website as our vehicle to grow that audience. So it's kind of that engagement.
I would argue one of the challenges with the last process is everybody started paying attention at 11:59 o'clock.
Which is typical.
Right, so the question is like, how do you start to build a snowball now? Recognizing it's hard. And, this becomes the first step of getting a little kind of breadcrumbs out there, and then if you start building the mailing list, I think practically, 80-90% of the respondents are gonna do it either through they're gonna see if we put it in the Hometown Weekly or patch or, got us at Facebook, like, you get 90% of people do that, and the question is, how do you get to the top of the last 10% by some proactive reach out?
I think that QR code is
Great idea.
great. Right.
I think yes, local businesses put it right in there.
And I think that's what I was gonna say, and then I would think Hometown Weekly too, you can just, like an ad card, so,
No, we'll probably do it for free if you do it like as a letter, like an FYI. You don't have to pay for that. Yeah.
So,
They don't really, I think.
and
usually
if the
it's free.
QR code is like, hey, you can have that introductory paragraph, like the verbiage, then boom, right?
And our thought was then in the newsletter, we would give the results of all our surveys, because we want everyone to know what we know. This is gonna be the theme, what we know,
Yep.
And then we will design future surveys to also have in the newsletter to keep, gathering information as things come up. Just trying to get people connected, and so they don't at the last minute say, oh, I didn't realize there was a new school building committee. This is what we're trying to avoid.
I think the grassroots effort is like a really, really great idea. I think that's something that will be very beneficial and something that, was started maybe too late last time. I think my question is, in regards to this initial survey, is the goal more just awareness, or are we actually looking to get feedback from this? Because if we are looking for feedback, how are we validating that these are Medfield residents who actually voted in that space? Because if we can't do that.
Or if I voted 6 times.
Exactly.
I took this survey 6 times. It's fair. So good.
Yeah, I mean, let's quickly run through the questions,
Sure.
and then we'll kind of come back to that point and think about that. I think our first question is, which Medfield schools have you toured, visited, in the last year? asking, our purpose of asking this, and we may want to rephrase this as I thought more about it since Tuesday night, is, if we want to get people in the school so they can see the facility and they can, like that Dell Street tour was really important, but seeing the tours of the others, if we're talking about the whole elementary school experience for our children today, would they come out? So we may want to rephrase this. Would you participate in a school tour for any of these, and which schools would you be interested in touring? Things of that nature. So it's a very quick, non-challenging question.
Would you like to visit Dale?
Yeah.
That's really what we're
Yeah.
talking about. But yeah.
Keep Steve busy.
The May 2020, and then we get into, well, we really want to quickly have to understand one question about the past, to be honest, but now we want to concentrate on the future. So you're going to see this, there's this one question, the May 2022 town meeting voted down the proposed new elementary school building adjacent to Wheelock. How would you best describe your position on the prior vote? It doesn't matter whether they went to town meeting or not, or, just what was your perspective, right? So, and we kind of ranked it, and it would be a single checkbox here. I thought it was a great plan and voted yes. Okay, it had weaknesses, but enough merit that I voted yes. All the way to the other spectrum, I thought it was a bad plan and voted no, or I did not vote, So we kind of get the range of the people that are engaging with us, what their perspective is, right? Then we go into, okay, thinking of the future. Okay, here are some key priorities that could influence your viewpoint as we evaluate the future plan. And we take these elements and rank them in your importance, what's important to you when we talk about the future plan. And we had several different.
I think we're gonna do the scale too, right, on this, right? That Bill, you were talking about, right? We're gonna have a scale where,
It's got once 5 weeks.
Yeah, 1 to 5.
yeah, and you would just, check the importance of it. And if the item didn't care to you, you'd say not at all. Didn't
So
matter
it's
to
an
you.
easy thing to take.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, we're trying to make it as simple and quick as we could. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, facility size, location, cost, state funded, open space, environmental impacts, and net zero building, community benefits, construction disruption, and education, historic preservation. I just threw these in from, we heard from Steve, enrollment, educational program, space, and other. And then the other, we allow them to put anything else in that was important to their viewpoint from their perspective.
Is it worth considering the process up here, given that was dinged a lot, I
Sure.
feel like in the last one?
Yeah, that.
You might need another word with process, because
Yeah,
they might,
there.
process of what? Are you saying the process that the school building committee took, or are you saying the process of building it?
A good school building committee process.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay,
So you say one not important, so someone would go through like facility size, and say that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
yeah, they're ready to check off in that
Yeah.
scale.
Okay.
You could have all fives, you got all ones, you could have.
Yeah,
zigzags, a whole bunch of things.
I'll fix the type of it later.
and we'll definitely have a, not at all, just.
Yeah.
I don't
Sure.
care about it, doesn't matter to me. Wouldn't, yeah.
And then please check the description that describes your relationship with the Medfield Public Schools. We don't want to get into a ton of demographic information, but we felt like this was a very solid one, is what's somebody's relationship? Are they pretty intimate because they have children, went to school, down to, I have had children in school in the past, but I don't know.
So really getting at is like, as a first cut, like, is there a generational divide
Yeah.
among the priorities?
Yeah.
Like I said, we were trying to like, listen, one of my, I've said this already in this meeting, but like. The survey, I'm excited about it, also worries me that like, we want to make sure that, people have the right data and have informed decisions, and what's most important is important, but I think that this is a good balance between, just like specifically, not specific. It's gonna give you certain breadcrumbs that we can drill on in the future, but it's not something that's, definitively will define how we.
We're not making decisions off of this.
Yeah.
We're just-
Right.
This is just, hey,
It's an information.
And I think it shows the community. we know we had a vote, it didn't pass, and we do care about why, right? That it's a fresh start, but, was divisive, we don't want to go back there, that's not what we're trying to do, but we do care about what happened, and we'd like some information to help us with the new start. By honoring what did happen.
And then the last questions, we kind of just asked, are there any additional topics you'd like to hear? And I mentioned, we brainstormed a whole series of newsletter topics to talk about, but we want to hear from them if there's anything specific that we could highlight. And then just, okay, let's make sure we're talking, it's kind of a sanity check on our outreaches. How did you hear about it? So we know about how we can more effectively continue to distribute future surveys. It's been put on if they can increase, and then really wrap up at the end. Hey, make sure you're staying abreast, make sure you go sign up, and then do you have any other feedback?
Do you say that line at the top too? I would say that twice. Yeah. Personally.
So, the rest was like our reworks. So
Yeah.
there we go.
From there up.
Do they have to go to this website to sign up for alerts? Is there a way to just collect email addresses through the survey and use that as our?
You have to go to the site and sign yourself up because you're subscribing then.
Yep.
And you're giving permission.
There's no way to like wave that right through the survey?
No.
Okay.
And
Just
there's-
thinking it's an additional
Yeah,
step, so it's just a little cleaner, if like,
be
we
great.
could go in, and it also would help us to
I'm not,
prevent,
Or-
filling out the survey multiple times and
Yeah.
viewing the data.
can we collect email addresses another way? To then auto subscribe them to the SVP committee, if it was stated, check here, please, I would like to be on the SBC mailing list, and then we add them into the town websites or.
I think there is a way and honest, subscribe to. Lists and very certain.
Well, let's follow up on
Definitely
that.
can.
Yeah.
We ask them if they want to, as long as we give a choice.
That's a good point.
Another incentive to do that, and I don't know if you thought about this, is sharing the results of this survey with the people who fill it out. So giving those respondents an opportunity to see it, but saying that you need to sign up for it to see that, right? Like,
It would be,
I think people who fill out surveys are for the most part interested in seeing the results of them, but.
Would there be a place so they could add their own emails onto the? Or is that not a good idea?
We volunteer that way. If there's a simple line item of like, would you like to be subscribing to surveys? If so, enter your email address here.
Right.
Yeah,
you say no, you move on.
Yeah, we can do it great. Can't. Go.
Yeah.
Well, part of it too should be, is that how Christine and the town hall team want people to sign up?
That's true.
Yeah,
Because there may be a specific way that you sign up with from the data that you give. That if we then have 125 emails and people think they gave them to us and they're gonna get signed up, and then they don't.
yeah.
So we should probably defer to your group as to how we do this.
And I can follow up with you on that as well. Yeah, just as a quick example. We're already there, everyone got now, this is where we're like, certain things, so that's a way to use an awful lot and. Just pressure on any of this subscribe, and I don't have to see this every way other than just subscribe to. School zone committee.
And you do choose too, when you do that, you're choosing what you want to look, there's many departments you get alerts from.
Yeah.
So when the people do it themselves, then they can choose.
Are there ever, maybe it happened the last time or not, but you have members of the building committee. Are there ever going to be situations further into the project where there are additional committees, subcommittees that we may choose to form to help run down issues or focus on things such that you would want to maybe ask the question if, are you interested in participating as situations arise? I have no idea. That may be totally irrelevant. Sometimes it's also a chance to gauge whether someone would like to participate in the process. If there were an opportunity, I don't know if there is, given that you already have an appointed / elected set of people doing this.
Well, I think it's.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, I mean, I think I think it's a great idea. I think probably not for this first survey, but I think
Okay.
as we go along the way.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it ends up, one of the people could do sort of part of a newsletter type of thing.
Yeah, it's also,
Yeah.
it's quite a process to form us. Right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so like to get somebody else in and like, it might be a challenge, like, I mean, it's.
Yeah, I don't know if
It's
there's
about-
ever like little things that you kind of give out as sub-projects where you're looking for more bodies or hands to do stuff.
So,
So again, we just saw these questions as being an intro as well as then to just start the conversation. And we're gonna learn from this, we're gonna have other meetings, we're gonna then say, hey, let's go tease this out and tease that out.
Our goal is to come back at the next SBC meeting with the survey done and a list of places to contact and then have people choose. And I don't know if we need a vote for that or a thumbs up that people are on board with that idea, because I don't. want
Yeah,
to
we can.
I think that's true, because for me, there's a little bit of a, there's a governance question of, like something like this, right? Like, we're trying to meet either weekly or bi-weekly. If my sense is, at least in the early going, our cadence is gonna be ahead of this group's. So we'll be running a little bit faster. I think the right process is to come, like, show you guys something like this, but if the survey's done in the meeting a week from now, and we're ready to launch it. Like, do you want us to wait for the next meeting, and get everybody's formal approval to do it, or can we just go ahead and do it? And the answer may be like, hey, listen, guys, for the first 3 or 4, I'd really prefer everybody kind of voted thumbs up formally before you do it, and then once we get comfortable that you guys know what you're doing, like then. Like, we'll give you a little bit more leeway, but.
Yeah, but the challenge you're
Can
gonna
it be
be running out of school year time. Right?
This would be great on the newsletter for school.
It would be great for the
Yeah.
leaders out to be getting this like information, right?
Well, why don't we pick our May date, since that was the next thing on our agenda?
Make it
If
earlier.
If we
Could
make
be
it
in 3
earlier in
weeks.
May, so we don't hold it up too much, then we can,
Yeah, man,
Pick our next
literally,
two
it'll be
dates
this
and-
Plugged into survey.
we're 2 hours.
so I just want to. I love it, you guys are
It's awesome.
really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Really good.
No.
I want
Good
to
idea.
just, the data we get from this. And going back to Guthrie's, like, we absolutely should share all of it.
100%, 100%.
That said. It's not a decision-making tool.
No,
In my
that's-
opinion.
no,
Okay, so like, I just want to make sure because. I've got stuck doing surveys before and decisions were being made on that.
Yeah.
And it was kind of.
Population.
It didn't go over well, it didn't go over well. This is,
Yeah.
let's find out what's kind of important and then we'll start digging down some rabbit holes on that.
Yeah,
So if we
exactly.
use it for that, I think it's a great idea, and I think you guys have done some really good stuff, and I think the newsletter is a great idea too. And I think distributing it and getting people to read it, may be a challenge, and I think this will start that,
You have a target number of responses that you're hoping to get?
13,000.
As a- She'll use
I think what we discussed, listen, you're gonna go out with some of the main communication channels, like hometown weekly or whatever. I think we would come back at some point and, before closing the survey, we would look at the end and see where we're at, and do we need more? In which case, the outreach to the individual groups of like, hey, we want to get to at least 500, like, I don't. I haven't done the work to figure out like what's statistically significant in terms of what, the end I need to
Right.
have it like be directional.
If you got, just solely based on the last time we did stuff like this, we got a couple of hundred, it would be a big.
But I think
So
it'll
let
be
me-
telling, based on the response that you have to the question about your family's relationship with the schools. The responses that you get back from that may also highlight where there's a gap. If you're not getting any responses from people who have, no longer have kids in school. Okay, we're missing our older demographic. Something got lost in that. So I think that will be maybe open up other channels that you need to get it out to.
That's what you're gonna use that to decide how long you want to use it over for. When you feel like you have a representative kind of sample.
Yeah, it
You
needs
can
to
say,
be
all right, we're
good.
good, we're gonna close it, publish. If you're not there yet, you can go continue the outreach.
Right.
My only, sorry, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, is it using a QR code? Sort of kind of pigeonholing a demographic as well.
Yes.
I don't think so.
You know, my mom wouldn't be able to do
Oh,
it,
yeah.
I think they're late seventies, they could use a QR code.
but like.
We can just send the link in an email.
Yeah, I can get link or.
I think a lot of,
I think multiple would be great. I
I
just
think you
think
need both.
Okay.
for survey questions, just in my experience, if we can shorten, and you can ignore me, but like the answers, some people don't, I know this sounds ridiculous, but some people won't read all the words to the end. So if it was like neutral but voted yes, neutral but voted no, like taking out some of the extra. Yeah, just like shortening it,
That's a good-
because people are gonna look at the survey and see a ton of words and be like, no.
It's like
Oh,
the
But if
question.
it's just, if it's just like the shortest you can make the answers without there being any ambiguity, I think will increase.
Yes, you're right.
Everybody gets an email that says, comes back, it says too long, did not read, so.
Right.
You know, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, just make it. But
And the only other piece you just wanted to mention,
Exactly.
was that in the bylaw for us, it says that we'll update the select board, once every 6 months. And, I just don't know if you want to put that on the next agenda or think about who's gonna do it, or we're gonna take turns or what you want to say. But as far as communication, obviously, that's a big audience.
What does that look like? Can I write them an email?
It doesn't say in the bylaw.
It's not being funny,
Yeah.
I mean, like, right?
I guess you could.
Going to a meeting, it's fine too, but then I have to get on an agenda, like, or we have to get on an agenda, whatever it may be.
But in terms
We
of,
can talk about
if I put the PR hat on, going
Yeah.
there is much more effective for us than going there. It doesn't mean that you guys.
I've been there
can-
before,
Yeah.
that's fine.
You
Yeah,
guys
I
can
don't mind.
go, or we can share it, everybody
Right.
can take one or something, or go together, I don't know.
Thank you for bringing that up.
But it is on there, yeah, so,
Is that the only two that's called out?
yeah, it's the only one written in the bylaw. Oh, no, it's actually written to school committee, about school committee too, but you guys are here, so we just figured you'd be updated.
I update the warrant committee as well, every meeting they go.
And
Agenda
Teresa's
item
on the
update.
planning board gets updated every month.
Thanks.
Look at that.
So, yeah, awesome, thank you.
should we be mindful of the fact that we're closing in on 9:15? Maybe pick our next two agenda meeting days and.
Please.
I was, having my calendar up before you said that, so, we talked, somebody brought up, 6:30 start time, and then other people brought up Wednesdays, or rotating Wednesday, Thursday, I think was what we said last time.
Yeah.
Again, no problem with that, or either. Later in the day is better for me, just because of family stuff, but, so, I'm happy to appease people if they want to go to 6:30, so I'm happy. So,
And
any
the
strong opinions there?
communication committee, we already booked for May 8th and 16th. Just so you-
Do we want to try for May 10th? Or do you want to go later in the month?
I was
Because
looking
this is
at,
a Thursday.
I was looking at 17th.
Right. I can't make it, but you guys, I'm not even on a board meeting.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I anticipate not all of us would make it every.
Yeah.
Or that week at least is what I was targeting.
I can't make the 17th either, but
What about I mean,
18,
do you want to do?
we have a school committee.
Yeah,
and Tuesdays are bad, right? Somebody say Tuesdays are bad?
A couple of Tuesdays, because we've got them.
We booked and then the warrant committee is 2 others. We can move the 16th.
They get a little pressure on that.
Carolyn, we can move the 16th probably.
We could, if you wanted to do the 16th, because we're all sitting here, so we
Yeah,
could.
we do the 16th. I think, so here's the deal, during the summer, my anticipation is that we're not going to meet very much July. or August. And I think we should, but if it's once in those 2 months, it gets real hard with vacations, in my experience. I don't know how you guys do your other,
Yeah.
meet every month no matter what, it's summer.
So do you want to,
we,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Well, it depends, if there's some momentum building and we have to have a
Yeah.
meeting with me, we can also meet virtually.
yeah,
That's still allowed right now, as far as I'm concerned, so.
so we want to do May 16th at 7?
Is everyone good with that? May 16th, 7 o'clock?
Oh, you could meet here and then run over there.
No, they have them here.
so if we did at 7 on the 16th. Could I? Meet virtually? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be right here.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so okay.
Okay, thank you.
Then for the
You wanna
community,
do one more? I'm sorry.
Yeah, like,
Just while we're on it, maybe get that next one in June.
mhm.
So that's 77, right? Not 630.
I did say 7 only because I was being selfish and said it's better for me. Does anyone have any strong feelings to move it up for half an hour? I'm happy to do so.
I can't do 630. That's why I'm.
Okay, yeah,
75.
it's just with kids, it's impossible for me.
Yes.
But I'm happy to do it as, I'm not gonna rule it. So my guy tells me if we're doing the 16th, 1, 2. You wanna do 3 weeks, like the week of the 5th or the week of the 12th? I think it's probably gonna be in one of those two, because I would say the week of the 5th is better, because it's the last one, the last full week of school.
right, there's gonna be all kinds of events, and if we do any other little PR piece, you know, where school year is.
When is Medfield?
September.
September, that's right.
Do we want to do June 7th, since this was a Thursday, and the next one's a Tuesday, either Wednesday?
That works for me.
That's good.
What is it?
Yep.
June
7th.
7th.
And do we decide 6:30?
I think 7.
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
give it a 7.
As long as it, yeah, as long as there's no strong objections.
So I'd love,
So that's a 7. Okay.
I think we just aim to be done at 8:30, and then I would love to make 9 a hard stop as an educator that's out of the building really
So-
early in the morning.
right,
Out of my house.
This is what?
Yeah.
Let's skip it this. I know. Sorry.
I don't have one in Dale.
I do.
All right, so it's the 7th.
So 7 on the 6th? Sorry, 7 on the 7th.
Concert at CB.
What's
Okay,
that?
The concert. at-
Yeah, so that week's tight because we have,
That's-
it's all 3 nights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
We don't know which one. Okay.
Well, yeah,
Wednesday,
band is,
band is
yeah,
Wednesday.
band is, which is the brass.
Do you know what time that starts at?
Yeah, 7 o'clock.
on what day?
Well, also Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
Band
You
is
can
on,
go to the following
Wednesday.
I think that's even worse.
So do we want to do?
I mean, honestly, it's
And
oh, if I'm a half an hour late. That's why, yeah, but that's.
Yeah,
cool.
Why don't we?
I have a kid in the band though too, and I haven't gone to a single
On the
concert this
7th,
year, so
okay.
I still maybe we should show it.
Go to their kids.
Well, I had students from work, it was, I was like, sorry.
I was gonna go, but and then I'm like.
Also, it's terrible.
Wait, how about the next week? The event then?
Oh, yeah.
The week of the,
So. Week of the 12th,
13th or
hold on.
14th.
I'm just gonna say 5th grade graduation was June 13th. I know that's during the day, but.
how about,
The 14th.
Let's
Or
keep that date.
people.
Start to 7:45.
so
So
I'm changing that to the 14th.
if
June
we could,
14th?
well, or keep the 7th,
Mhm,
do a 7:45 start and we'll have a short agenda.
that works.
I didn't care if it was 7:30, but.
Yeah, I think 7:45 would probably be better.
Okay, so 7:45?
7:45 start, June 7th, and we'll do a short agenda, meaning like,
that, I wonder, I'm
Oh, but
solid
how
for you guys,
Steve
but
is
I'm
gonna
doubting
be at
yourself,
the
you guys.
concert.
That,
Yeah,
with that,
we started.
I mean, you gotta be in the whole thing anyway.
yeah, I can come right after.
Okay.
And we'll just, the reason,
I'll have Bob throw it in detail up there.
this high level, this,
I
Steve
think
was
you're
really
right.
great today.
Exactly.
That was-
Diamond I can put on there.
You're right, yeah. So generally speaking, this is, I agree with you, so this is a longer meeting than I'd like to have, that said, Steve was really good,
Oh, it's great.
informative, so the last thing I wanted to do, and I didn't know how much he had when I said, this, the agenda got set up, so I apologize for the length of the meeting. Meeting every 3 weeks, so next within 3 weeks, someone got past 3 weeks, I think will help shorten the meetings, right, because I think, I'm a big, like, get in, get busy, get out, and, so I think in depth, when we set up these agendas, we have some, we'll keep that in mind, about 8:30. All right, before we close the meeting, hold on, I'm just gonna make sure if there's any public comment. We have, Chris here. All right, we have no open questions. Chris, any comments, questions?
Yeah, just, there were just some things as we were going along, so sorry to kind of be having this menu of things jumping around. I don't know whether this is a possibility, but it was really fascinating to hear Steve's comments about the creative project funding options. I don't know if there's such thing as a consultant who goes into that, but that might be a way of using that money. In case Christine needs somebody to investigate those things, and she doesn't have the bandwidth. So I don't know whether such a person exists, but it just.
I'm sure they do.
It just jumped out at me as some way they use that money. I'm curious on the other thing that jumped to me is on the survey. You may want to look at this, the open space and rec. I don't know if you've seen the open space and recreation survey. It's closed now. They did a really good job with the rating schedules, the rating mechanism for that. I thought that was excellent. So that was something that jumped out at me. The other thing you might want to ask on the survey, which will help in the future, is the source of your information. Like, where did you learn about this survey? Hometown Weekly, Patch. I didn't see that. The website's gonna be updated, right? Is the website gonna be, I think, Christina had mentioned there was gonna be an update to the change to the website.
Just the general town.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but I don't know what that's gonna impact functionally going forward, just something to think about. Yeah. And then the only other question I had for you guys was, are you guys getting SBC? Like, did you happen to get the email I sent you guys?
I got it.
You did get it, okay, just want to make sure. It's on
Specifically the
on
one,
MSBA,
yes, thank you.
okay. That was it.
Like to make a motion to adjourn? Second.
Let's go around the room.
Yes.
Mather, Mike, whoever, yes.
Go Warner, yes.
Lisa James, yes.
Joe Garcia.
Tony Peppers, honestly.
Bob Donahoe, yes.
For me, yes.
Meredith Chamberlain, yes.
Carolyn Casey, yes.
Barbara Worth, yes.
Kristen Samini, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.